Hi, this is Damien AtHope, and I am an axiological atheist, which can simply be understood as a value theory or a value science atheist. And as a value theorist, I care about that which is valuable, that which is worthy, that which is true, that which is beneficial, that which is helpful, that which is accurate. So I wanted to address what's been going on with a lot of people. There's been a lot of hate and bigotry and violence being committed against LGBTQI people. So this video is on how LGBTQI-Phobia hurts us all. To me, everyone needs home, which is an acronym that I have called honor, open, motivate, embrace. And to me, it's kind of like a behavior that we should have towards others. We should honor their dignity. We should be open to hearing ideas. We should motivate others, inspiring them to be their best, and us as well. And we should embrace, the world as our fellow people, regardless of their sexual orientation, regardless of their age, regardless of their nationality, race, color. The whole point to me is that we should see that we truly are one humanity, and we should really care about all. But some people seem to have a problem with equality. To me, equality is a virtue. It's that ethical, prosocial behavior that we do to honor the dignity of others. And when you don't do this, in a sense, you're not only dishonoring them, you're dishonoring the dignity, in a sense, in yourself. And so, to me, this also I want to address is this, talk that's been going on and about straight pride parades. And to me, the idea of demanding a straight pride parade makes about as much sense as demanding to receive handicap parking spots for long-distance marathon runners. The claim of straight pride is a joke. It's likely inspired by some mix of ignorance, fear, and or hate of LGBTQI people. So let me explain for those who don't know what those acronyms LGBTQI stand for. So L is lesbian, G is gay, like gay men. And then B is bisexual, T is for transgender, Q is for questioning or queer, which also involves genderqueer, and I is for intersex. In today's society, the personal, sexual, or gender orientation of an individual who lives openly as themselves has been an area of conflict. And let me go on a little more for those who don't understand the terms like genderqueer and intersex. Genderqueer, alternatively non-binary gender, is a catch-all category of gender identities outside the gender binary, whether internal, external, or both, that express other than a typical man or woman, thus outside cis normativity. It can be said to denote or relate to a person who does not subscribe to conventional gender distinctions, but identifies with neither, both, or a combination of male and female genders. Non-binary people may express a combination of masculinity and femininity, or neither, in their gender expression. Gender identity is separate from sexual or romantic orientation, and non-binary people have a variety of sexual orientations, just as transgender or cisgender people do. Intersex is a general term used for a variety of conditions to which a person is born with reproductive or sexual anatomy that does not fully fit the type of typical binary sexual classes. Intersex people are individuals born with any set of variation of sex characteristics. This can include chromosomes, gonads, sexual hormones, or genitals that, according to the UN Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights, do not fit the typical definitions of male and female bodies. Explaining what is intersex according to the Intersex Society of North America. What they say is, for example, a person might be born appearing to be female on the outside, but having mostly male typical anatomy on the inside. Or a person may be born with genitals that seem to be in between the usual male and female types. For example, a girl may be born with a noticeably extra large clitoris, or be lacking, in a sense, a full vaginal opening. Or a boy may be born with notably small penis, or a scrotum that is divided so that it's more like a labia. Or a person may be born with a mosaic of genders or genetics, so that they and the cells have XX chromosomes, and some may have also XY. Though we speak of intersex as an inborn condition, intersex anatomy doesn't always show up at birth. Sometimes a person isn't found to have intersex anatomy until she or he reaches, or they reach, the age of puberty, or find themselves infertile as an adult, or die of old age, and since it's figured out then. Some people live and die with intersex anatomy without anyone, including themselves, ever knowing. Which variations of sexual anatomy count as intersex? Well, in practice, different people have different answers to that question. That's not surprising, because intersex isn't a direct or natural, in a sense, category. What does this mean? Intersex is a socially constructed category that reflects real biological variation. To better explain this, we can liken the sex spectrum to a color spectrum. There is no question that in nature there are different wavelengths that translate into colors. Most of us see as, in a sense, red, blue, orange, and yellow. But the division to distinguish, say, between orange and red is made only when we need it, like when we are asked for the particular paint color. Sometimes social necessity leads us to make color distinctions that otherwise would seem incorrect or even irrational. As for instance, we call certain people black or white when they are not especially black or white, as we would otherwise use those terms. In the same way, nature presents us with sex anatomy spectrums: breasts, penises, clitoris, scrotums, labia, gonads. All of these vary in size and shape and morphology. So-called sex chromosomes can vary quite a bit too. But in human culture, sex categories get oversimplified into male and female, and sometimes intersex. In order to simplify social interactions, express what we know and feel, and maintain, in a sense, order. So nature doesn't describe, in a sense, where these categories of male and female end, and the category of intersex begins, or where the category of intersex ends and the category of male and female begins. Humans decide this. Humans today, typically doctors, decide how small a penis has to be, or how unusual combination of sex parts has to be, before it counts as intersex. Humans decide whether a person with XXY chromosomes or XY chromosomes and androgen insensitivity will count as intersex. In explaining how common is intersex, according to the Intersex Society of North America, they say, to answer this question is in an uncontroversial way, you'd have to first get everyone to agree on what counts as intersex, and also to agree on what should count as strictly male or strictly female. This is very hard to do. How small does a penis have to get before it's considered a clitoris, or it would count as an intersex? How do you count sex chromosome abnormalities in intersex if there's no apparent external sexual ambiguity? Alice Derger explores this question in greater depth in her book, Hermaphrodites and the Medical Invention of Sex. Here's what we do know. If you ask experts at a medical center how often a child is born, so notably atypical in terms of genitalia, that a specialist in sexual differentiations is called in, the number comes out to be about 1 in 1,500 to 1 in 2,000 births. But a lot more people than that are born with subtler forms of sexual anatomy variations, some of which show up not until later in life. They also provide a summary of statistics drawn from the article by Brown University researcher Annie Frisco Sterling. The basis for the article, an extensive review in medical literature from 1955 to 1998, aimed at producing, in a sense, estimates for these frequencies in sexual variation. So it's the total number of people, in a sense, whose bodies different from standard male and female birth is 1 in 100 births. And the total number of people receiving surgery to, in a sense, normalize their genital appearance is 1 or 2 in 1,000 births. So it's actually a very high population of the general public. And which is why, to me, I think it's important to address intersex conditions, since it's not like it's just a small percentage. Intersex Society of North America is devoted to the systemic change to end shame, secrecy, and unwanted genital surgeries for people born with an anatomy that some have decided is not standard for male and female. They report to have learned from listening to individuals and families dealing with intersex that intersexuality is primarily a problem of stigma and trauma, not gender. Parents' distress must not be treated by surgery on a child. Professional mental health care is essential. Honest, complete disclosure is good medicine. And all children should be assigned a boy or girl without early surgery. In explaining what is the difference between being transgender or transsexuality and having an intersex condition, according to the Intersex Society of North America, they say people who identify as transgender or transsexual are usually people born with typical male and female anatomies, but feel as though they are born into the wrong body. For example, a person who identifies as trans people may have typical female anatomy, but feel like a male, or may have typical male anatomy, but feel like a female, and seek to become female or male by hormones, or electing to have sex reassignment surgeries. People who have intersex condition have anatomy that's not considered typically male or female in some way or in some amount. Many people confuse trans people with people with intersex conditions because these two groups of people who are in a sense, would like to choose their own gender identity, and sometimes who choices require hormonal treatments or surgery. Though these similarities, it is also true, albeit rare, that some people who have intersex condition also decide to change their sex gender at some point in their life. So people with intersex condition might also identify themselves as trans. In spite of these similarities, these two groups should not be counted as one group. The truth is that the vast majority of people who have intersex conditions identify as binary male or female rather than trans or non-binary. The National Center for Transgender Equality also states something similar, that most trans people are not non-binary, and that being non-binary is not the same thing as being intersex, nor are non-binary people usually intersex. Try not to make any assumptions about people's intersex status nor their gender. You can't tell if someone is non-binary simply by looking at them. Just like how you can't tell if someone is transgender just by looking at them. While some transgender or intersex people are non-binary, most have a gender identity that is either male or female, and should be treated like any other man or woman. Thus, where all people who identify as trans or non-binary or intersex experience, in a sense, problems, only a certain percentage, in a sense, experience gender identity. Only a small portion of intersex people experience these sort of problems. It's also important to understand the differences between different groups, because in spite of similarities, they in fact may hold many different struggles, including different forms of discrimination. You don't have to understand what it means for someone to be non-binary or intersex or trans to respect them. Some people haven't heard a lot about non-binary genders or intersex, or have trouble understanding them, and that's okay. But identities that some people don't understand still deserve respect. Different non-binary people may use different pronouns. Many non-binary people may choose to use they, while others use he or she, and still others use other pronouns. Asking whether someone would like to be referred to as he or she or they or another pronoun may feel awkward to some at first, but it is one of the simplest and most important ways to show respect for another's identity. The following writing was largely adapted from How Homophobia Hurts Everyone and How Homophobia Hurts Everyone, a Theoretical Foundation by Warren J. Bumperfield. In these areas, one can see the difficulties that come about when dealing with LGBTQI phobia. They are fear, hatred, disgust, maltreatment, intolerance of same-sex relationships, and atypical gender behavior, having the overlap or, in a sense, between the lines, gender identity, sexual or romantic orientation, and or people who identify as, who are perceived as being LGBTQI. LGBTQI phobia refers to many ways in which people are oppressed on the basis of sexual orientation and gender orientation. Sometimes homophobia, transphobia, genderqueer phobia, and intersex phobia is, in a sense, intentional, where there is clear intent to hurt lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, genderqueer, or intersex people. Homophobia, transphobia, genderqueer phobia, and intersex phobia can also be unintentional, where there is, in a sense, no direct desire to hurt anyone, but where, in a sense, people are unaware of the consequences of their actions. Intentional and cultural, in a sense, homophobia, transphobia, genderqueer phobia, or intersex phobia is often referred to, in a sense, in the guise of heteronormativity, heterosexism, and cisnormativity or cissexism. Heteronormativity and sexism are beliefs in the inherent superiority of heterosexuality and typical cisnormative gender behavior, thereby, in a sense, their right for dominance. It carries with the assumption that everyone one meets is, in a sense, heterosexual or cisgender normative. Personal homophobia, transphobia, genderqueer phobia, or intersex phobia is prejudice. It is a personal belief that a lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, genderqueer, or intersex people are sinful, immoral, sick, or inferior to typical right male and female, cis-normative heterosexuals, or, in a sense, incomplete as women and men. Prejudice towards any group is learned behavior. People have to be, in a sense, taught to be prejudiced. Personal homophobia, transphobia, and genderqueer phobia and intersex phobia sometimes experienced by fear of being perceived as these groups, as either lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, genderqueer, or intersex. This can lead to trying to, in a sense, prove that oneself is normal, like everyone else, to fit in. Like the call for straight pride parades. Anyone, regardless of their sexual or gender orientation, can experience homophobia, transphobia, genderqueer phobia, or intersex phobia. Because in a sense, you don't even have to classify as one of these conditions. People often make wrong assumptions about people because of the way they talk, the way they look, the way they dress, the way they act, as being, in a sense, part of the LGBTQI community in some way, even if they're not. Interpersonal homophobia, transphobia, genderqueer phobia, or intersex phobia is the fear, dislike, or hatred of people believed to be lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, genderqueer, or intersex. This hatred or dislike may be expressed by name-calling, verbal and physical harassment, and individual acts of discrimination, or by the rejection of friends, co-workers, families, or even physical harm. Institutional homophobia, transphobia, genderqueer phobia, or intersex phobia refers to the many ways in which government, business, religious institutions, and other institutions or organizations discriminate against people on the basis of sexual or gender orientation. These organizations and institutions set policies, allocate resources, and maintain both written and unwritten standards of behavior of their members in ways that discriminate against LGBTQI people. Cultural homophobia, transphobia, genderqueer phobia, or intersex phobia refers to social standards and norms that dictate that being heterosexual and cisnormative are better and more moral than being lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, genderqueer, intersex, and that everyone is actually heterosexual, cisnormative, or they should be, which hurts LGBTQI people. Examine the major conflicts for LGBTQI people. LGBTQI people are regularly attacked for no other reason than their attackers' fear and homophobia, transphobia, genderqueer phobia, or intersex phobia. Most people act out of fear of LGBTQI people in non-violent yet still oppressive and discriminatory ways. More common are ways in the public arena. Relatives often shun or no longer acknowledge their lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, genderqueer, intersex family members. Co-workers are distant or cold to lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, genderqueer, intersex employees. Or people stay away from, in a sense, asking about the individual's life and, in a sense, acquaintances outside of the workplace. Many religious organizations have started to, in a sense, instigate policies that can be considered against LGBTQI people being a part of their organization or holding office. And many businesses have adhered to, in a sense, norms of social event which prevent lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, genderqueer, or intersex employees from bringing their, in a sense, same-sex or gender non-conforming partners, while heterosexual, heteronormative, or cis-normative employees bring their opposite sex, heteronormative, cis-normative partners. Being discriminated against for their, in a sense, normal lives outside of the office, as well as the offices or workplaces that they interact in their daily lives. And this hurts LGBTQI people. So to sum it up, how LGBTQI phobia hurts us all. 1. LGBTQI phobia locks all people into rigid sexual or gender roles that inhibit, in a sense, human creativity and human relations and self-expressions. 2. LGBTQI phobia comprises this integrated part of what sexual sexual normative and gender, in a sense, conforming people by pressuring them to treat others, in a sense, badly for being LGBTQI, and actions that actually go against our own basic humanity. 3. LGBTQI phobia limits our ability to form close, intimate relationships with members of one's own sex or gender if it feels, in a sense, different, and it also limits our openness to romantic and friendships. And number 4, LGBTQI phobia generally limits, in a sense, communication with a, in a sense, significant portion of the population. And more specifically, it limits, in a sense, family and friend relationships. Number 5, LGBTQI phobia prevents some lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, genderqueer, intersex people from developing an honest identity. And it adds to the pressure, in a sense, to marry and or have children, and places an undue stress on themselves and their families and friends. Number 6, LGBTQI phobia are caused by, in a sense, this pressure of, in a sense, sexual activity, which increases the chances, in a sense, of pregnancy and the spread of sexually transmitted diseases. Young people of all sexual and gender identities are often pressured to become heterosexual gender normative to prove They're normal. Number 7, LGBTQI-Phobia results in the elimination of any discussion of the lives and sexuality of LGBTQI people in the curriculum, keeping an important information from all students and all people in society in general. 8, LGBTQI-Phobia can be used to stigmatize, silence, and or on occasion target people who are perceived or defined by others as being perceived as lesbian, gay, bisexual, in the sense genderqueer, transgender, intersex, but who are actually heterosexual and gender normative in the binary categories of male and female. LGBTQI-Phobia prevents heterosexuals and those who are gender normative from accepting and benefiting from the gifts offered by LGBTQI people. These range from theoretical insights, social, in a sense, even for some spiritual visions, contributions of the arts, culture, to family life, friends, indeed, to all parts of society. Number 10, LGBTQI people, along with racism, sexism, classism, etc., exhibits in a sense, unified and effective, in a sense, governmental and societal response that actually promotes more AIDS. So it promotes disease because we don't talk about things and we don't work on things. 11, LGBTQI-Phobia takes energy away from more positive activities as a whole. 12, LGBTQI-Phobia, in a sense, inhibits appreciation for other types of diversity, making it, in a sense, unsafe for everyone. Because each person, in a sense, can be thought to have unique traits considered, in a sense, not always mainstream or part of the dominant. Therefore, we are all hurt when one of us is disrespected because of LGBTQI phobia. As an atheist, my views on sexuality are if you're lesbian, gay, bisexual, pansexual, straight, asexual, intersex, trans, genderqueer, or you're not sure, that's cool. But if you hate on others, shame on you. According to ScienceDaily.com, homosexuality can refer to both attraction or sexual behavior between people of same sex, or to a sexual orientation. They state that most scientists today agree that sexual orientation is most likely the result of a complex interaction of environment, cognitive, and biological factors. And although homosexuality does not appear to be adaptive from a strict evolutionary standpoint, because homosexuality does not produce children, there is ample evidence of its existence throughout human history. Moreover, although a number of biological factors have been considered by scientists, such as hormones, chromosomes, polygenetic effects, brain structure, and viral influences, no specific scientific consensus exists on as to how biology influences sexual orientation. Most scientists agree that it is unlikely that there is a single so-called gay gene that determines something as complex as sexual orientation, and that is more likely to be the result of an interaction between genetic, biological, environmental, and cultural factors. According to Scientific American, there is cross-cultural evidence for the genetics of homosexuality. According to ScienceNews.org, there is DNA differences are linked to having same-sex partners. According to LiveScience.com, being gay is not a choice. Years of research suggest that people can't, in a sense, change their sexual orientation because they just want to, and that trying to, in a sense, can cause mental anguish. What's more, some studies suggest that being gay may have a genetic or biological basis. Here are 5 myths about gay people debunked by science. Number 1, gay people have been accused of being unfit parents, more likely to be pedophiles, incapable to sustain, in a sense, lasting relationships, and worse. But research shows that these and other myths just aren't a basis in fact. And number 2, despite a popular perception that male and female pairings are the only natural way, the animal kingdom actually exhibits full examples of same-sex couples. Penguins, dolphins, bisons, swans, giraffes, and chimpanzees are just a few of the many species that sometimes pair up in same-sex partnerships. Researchers are still mulling over the evolutionary reasons, if any, for gay animal sex, since it doesn't produce offspring. Some ideas are that it helps strengthen social bonds or encourages some individuals to focus their resources on nurturing, in a sense, their nieces and nephews, thus boosting their own genes indirectly. Or it may be simply for fun. Not every sexual act has to have, in a sense, a reproductive function, said Janet Main, a biologist at Georgetown University. Number 3, another stereotype is that gay relationships aren't real or lasting as heterosexual ones. However, research has found it to be untrue. Long-term studies of gay couples indicates that their relationships are just as stable as straight pairings. There is considerable evidence that both lesbian and gay men want to be in strong, committed relationships and are successful in creating these partnerships, despite difficulties created by social prejudice, stigma, and the lack of legal recognition of same-sex relationships in parts of the world, or support in parts of the United States, said UCLA psychologist Annie Palupk, co-author of the book chapter on the subject, published in 2007 in the Annual Review of Psychology. For example, John Gottman, a University of Washington professor of psychology, and his colleagues collected data from homosexual couples across 12 years and found that about 20% had broken up over that time. The rate projected over a 40-year period is slightly lower than the divorce rate for first marriages among heterosexual couples over the same time span. Accordingly to the study published in 2003 in the Journal of Homosexuality, the overall implication of this research is that we have to shake off the stereotypes of homosexual relationships and to have more respect for them as committed relationships. In fact, the study found that gay couples tend to be better at resolving conflicts and encouraging positive emotions. Number 4, and especially pernicious myth is that most adults who sexually abuse children are gay. A number of research has looked into this question to determine if homosexuals are more likely to be pedophiles than heterosexuals, and the data indicates that it is not the case. For example, a 1998 study led by Kurt Freud of the Clark Institute for Psychiatry in Canada, scientists showed pictures of children to adult gay and straight males and measured sexual arousal. Homosexual men reacted no more strongly to the pictures of male children than heterosexual men reacted to pictures of female children. A study led by Carol Jenny of the University of Colorado Health Science Center surveyed 269 cases of children who had been sexually molested by adults. In 82% of the cases, they signed the offender as heterosexual partner of a close relative to the child. The researchers reported in the Journal of Pediatrics. In only 2 out of the 269 cases, the offender was identified as being gay or lesbian. The empirical research does not show that gay or bisexual men are any more likely than heterosexual men to molest children, wrote Gary M. Hick, a professor of psychology at the University of California, Davis. Hick, who was also involved in a study from 1998 to 1994, compiled reviews of research on this topic. Number 5, many of those who oppose gay marriage and gay adoption charge the same-sex parents aren't good for kids, and that a child needs both father and mother to grow up as a healthy adult. However, research shows that children of gay parents tend to, in a sense, fare just fine. For example, one recent study looked at 90 teens, half living with female same-sex couples and the other with heterosexual couples, showing that both groups fared similarly in school. Teen boys in same-sex households had grade point averages about 2.9 compared with 2.65 of their counterparts in the heterosexual homes. Teen girls showed several results of 2.8 for same-sex households and 2.9 for girls in heterosexual families. Another study found that kids with 2 moms or 2 dads were no more likely than their counterparts in traditional homes to engage in the so-called delinquent activities, such as, in a sense, damaging other property, shoplifting, or getting into fights. The bottom line is that science shows that children raised in a sense, 2 same-sex gender parents do as well on average as children raised in 2 different gender parents, said Timothy Biblizate, a sociologist at the University of Southern California. This is obvious inconsistent with the widespread belief or claim that children must be raised by a mother and father to do well. Both studies were described in literature review and published in February 2010 of the Journal of Marriage and Family. And here is 3 myths about bisexuality, also debunked by science. Bisexuality is a tendency to be sexually attracted to both men and women. To some, this may sound like a superpower, doubling one's romantic options. But in real life, bisexuality can be thought to be, in a sense, an awkward identity to have, creating a challenge, in a sense, truly fitting into or with either straight or LGBT communities. But most important, bisexuality tends to be quite misunderstood. Myths and stereotypes about bisexuality abound, some even contradicting one another. Straight and LGBT people alike may hold such stereotypes, in a sense compounding the difficulties bisexual people can have fitting in. Luckily, an increasing number of research have been producing, in a sense, and improving our understanding of bisexuality. Here are 3 examples of how science has worked to combat misconceptions about bisexuality. Myth number 1. There's no such thing as bisexuality. This is especially laughable. How can you tell a group of individuals they don't exist? But the idea that all people have to be either straight or gay is pervasive and present, especially when it comes to men. Frustratingly, even with the most LGBT, in a sense, friendly circles, you can encounter the ideas that there's no such thing as a bisexual man. Researchers have quite clearly laid this myth to rest, with a study recently published in the Archives of Sexual Behavior. Researchers, in a sense, recruited straight, gay, and bisexual men and exposed them to a variety of erotic film clips. Not only were participants asked to rate their subjective feeling of arousal in response to the clips, they were also connected to physical equipment that measured changes in genital arousal. As would be expected, heterosexual men responded with much more subjective and genital arousal to films containing women rather than ones containing men, and vice versa for gay men. However, bisexual men were aroused relatively similar by videos of both men and women. They were also more aroused by bisexual clips, for example, 2 men and 1 woman that were up to the other groups. Importantly, these differences were both in response arousal and objective measurement of their genital arousal. It is clear from the study that these individuals were not pretending to be bisexual. Myth number 2, bisexuality is just a phase. This myth, bisexuality, is represented as a state of experimentation or confusion, stereotypically experienced during one's college years, that occur before a person settles on their true sexual identity. Lisa Damien has conducted some very sophisticated work on this topic, in which she examines the sexual identities of women over long periods of time. In a paper published in Developmental Psychology, she reports on a sample of women she followed over a period of 10 years. Her results clearly show that bisexuality was not a transitional period. Very few women had identified as bisexual in adolescence changed their identity to either straight or lesbian by the end of the study. In fact, only 8% of the group tested did so. Rather, bisexual women were consistently sexually fluid over a long period of time, maintaining attractions to both genders to varying degrees. Of course, of a decade. Myth number 3. Bisexual people can't be faithful to their partners. This myth, arguably is most pernicious one, stems from the assumption that one partner cannot satisfy the person who is attracted to both genders. Sooner than later, other people assume they'll yearn for someone of the other gender that the partner is not. In these studies, people tend to perceive bisexual individuals as being more likely to cheat on partners than heterosexual, gay, or lesbian individuals. In reality, a great many bisexual individuals have happily monogamous relationships. For example, by the end of Damien's 10-year study, 89% of bisexual women were in monogamous, long-term relationships. Further research suggests that bisexual individuals who do desire multiple sex partners may typically achieve this by goal of negotiating open relationships with their partners, not by seeking to go behind a partner's back in so-called cheating. Samantha Joel, PhD, states that she could not find any research supporting the idea that bisexuals are any less faithful or less honest to their partners than people of other sexual orientations. Here's a little bit info from Between the Gender Lines, the Science of Transgender Identity from Harvard EDU. The scientific graph on gender identity and gender orientation are yet an incomplete and incomprehensible representation. Transgender individuals are those who identify with a gender that differs from the assigned sex and cisgender or those who identify with their assigned gender. This is a facet of identity that is completely distinct from sexual orientation. These graphs, in a sense, do not represent the full spectrum of either facet, as they are, in a sense, multidimensional in nature. For instance, there may be genders that some identify with that are neither, in a sense, male or female, thus non-binary. Furthermore, there are no lines that divide these identities, and it may be considered, in a sense, as overlapping. And according to Catherine J. Wu, PhD, a biologist and science communicator, sex determination, the way we are coded into biological sex, is, and of itself, complicated. There are far more options to understand than just male or female, and countless incidents for species that can actually transit from one sex to another within a single lifetime. With most mammals, however, the majority of individuals are cisgender, male or female. Transgender individuals are estimated to comprise about 0.3 of the adult male population. Little is known about the cause of transsexuality or transgenderism, and many of the studies that have been conducted, particularly psychological studies, have since been widely discredited. More, in a sense, on that later. However, scientists do seem to have some information on the biological basis of several factors. First and foremost is that gender identity genetic is a question. It seems the answer would be yes. Though, as with most traits involving identity, there are some environmental influences. One classical way that scientists to test a trait, whether a characteristic such as red hair, to cancer, sensibly to love of honoring horror movies, is influence of genetics in twin studies. Identical twins have the same genetic background and are usually raised in the same environment. In a sense, non-identical twins, however, share only half of their genes, but tend also to be raised in same environments. Thus, if identical twins tend to share a trait more, in a sense, than unidentical twins, that trait is probably influenced by genetics. Several of these kind of studies have shown that identical twins are more often both transgender that, in a sense, unidentical twins are, indicating that there is indeed a genetic influence to this identity. According to Catherine J. Wu, PhD, transgender women tend to have brain structures that resemble cisgender women rather than cisgender men. Two sexual dysmorphic differences between male and men and women, areas of the brain often, in a sense, compared between men and women. The bed nucleus and the strata termeculus, probably saying this wrong, and sexual dysmorphic nucleus of transgender women are more similar to those of cisgender women than to those of cisgender men, suggesting that general brain structure of these women is keeping with their gender identity. In 1995 and 2000, two independent teams of researchers decided to examine the region of the brain called the bed nucleus of the strata termeculus in trans and cisgender men and women. The functions in anxiety, but it also is on average twice as large and twice as densely populated with cells in men compared to women. This sexual dimorphism is pretty robust, and through science, and though science doesn't know why it exists, it appears to be a good marker of male versus female brains in a sense. Thus, these two studies sought to examine the brains of transgender individuals to figure out if their brains better resembled their assigned or their chosen identified sexual male and female. Interestingly, both teams discovered that male to female transgender women had a more closely resembling of cisgender women than of men in both size and cell density, and that female to male transgender men had resembling cisgender men. These differences remained even after scientists took into account the fact that many transgender men and women in their study were taking estrogen and testosterone during their transition. By including cisgender men and women who were also on hormones not corresponding to their assigned biological sex for a variety of medical reasons. According to Catherine J. Wu, these findings have since been confirmed and collaborated in other studies and other regions of the brain, including the region of the brain called the sexual dysmorphic nucleus that is believed to affect sexual behavior in animals. It has been conclusively shown that hormone treatment can vastly affect the structure and composition of the brain. Thus, several teams sought to characterize the brains of transgender men and women who had not yet undergone hormone treatment. Several studies confirmed these previous findings, showing that once more that transgender people appear to have born with brains that are similar to the gender of their identity rather than to which one they were assigned. Interestingly, while hormone treatments may have caused issues in the previous studies, they also gave scientists clues on how these differences in brain anatomy may have arisen. Brain development is heavily influenced by, in a sense, parental environment, what hormones the fetus is exposed to in the mother's uterus. Sometimes scientists believe that female to male transgender men, for instance, may have been exposed to inadequate levels of estrogen during development. This phenomenon could have two causatives. One, not enough estrogen in the fetus's immediate environment, or two, enough estrogen in the environment but poor sensitivity in the fetus. Think of it like a cell phone tower controlling, remote calls. The tower may not be producing enough signal, scenario number one, or the receiving phone may be unable to process the message, scenario two. In either case, the call doesn't make it through as it normally would. According to Catherine J. Wu, and so, while the list of causes for transgender identity continue to grow, it has become quite clear that it is not, in a sense, a conscious choice, similar to that which has been described for reasons behind sexual orientation. Still, at least 63% of transgender individuals experience, in a sense, debilitating acts of discrimination on a regular basis, including, in a sense, up to incarceration, homelessness, and physical assault or death. When about 1.7% of the population is in some way affected by the cases of ambiguous genitalia at birth or intersex, these findings seem staggering. Also, there were So where do we stand on transgender issues? Science tells us that gender is certainly not binary. It may not even be a linear spectrum. Like many other facets of identity, it can operate on a broad range of levels and operate outside many definitions. And it also appears that gender may not be static as we once assumed. At the forefront of this, transgender identity is complex. It is unlikely we'll be able to absolute it into a neat, confined set of causes, and there are still much more that needs to be learned. But we know that several of those causes are biological. These individuals are not suffering from mental illness or the capacity to choose a different identity. Transgender identity is multidimensional, but it deserves no less recognition or respect than any other facet of humankind. According to ScienceDaily.com, transgender brains are more like their desired gender from an early age. Here is a response on the topic I once received. Damien AtHope. My only problem with transgenders is just that, my problem. They got a right, to quote Chuck Berry, they can do their thing. It's their scene. What I don't understand, and it's my problem, not theirs, and therefore it doesn't really matter, just like Jenner, there is still has a penis. I was told that what happens with one of these cats is that somehow they don't see a penis there, they see a vagina. So if you're going to be transgender, why keep the penis? Again, it's my problem. Challenger. My response. Not understanding can often be a problem. A good choice is to ask real questions. Talk in a positive attitude towards true understanding. I will not speak to specifically what is to be a transgender person. I will, however, use my experience of being an intersex genderqueer male. And yes, all three must be understood to accurately reflect the ontology, the thingness of things, and qualities of what, why, and how I am. I try to never believe that I think about things I am uninformed about. And when it comes to involving beliefs, I may or may not even, in a sense, understand how to investigate, as I am at some point need that there can be rational thinking, because rational ignorance of something about someone else who doesn't matter. This completes my understanding, as I don't want to, in a sense, harm others through my ignorance. I can say we relatively can understand that which is different in general. We humans are in a sense, scared social creatures. We must champion suppressing this, as it is this we are then not just something that we can or should honor is the dignity of others. But so doing is also to understand we start improving our, in a sense, universal emotive valuing and honoring of people who, in a sense, we touch in our daily lives. I try to see it like this. I realize that my life is written in the evidence of my character and behaviors. I wish to care, and often have to care first with others. But I'll tell you, I have a flourishing humanity because I do so. This is like the feeling of having someone care or love you and tell you they love you back. I burst inside with deep and calming joy, as you will understand that now, by trying to, in a sense, understand others, I have started to understand me. Starting to see my value. And by doing so, I have become my own friend. I started to love me. I see we have to understand and love and also show kindness to ourselves and others. The sad truth is, in my past, I used to not even care or understand. Now I truly see its value of connection and understanding and loving others in kindness. What we don't understand, we often come to fear. And that which we fear, we often justify to hate. That which we hate, we often not just oppose, but we wish to discriminate against, oppress, or even destroy. May I never again be that person. It shames me that I ever was. I wish to never be like that again. I'm not perfect, nor do I claim to be. But I want to strive to be better. I want to strive to understand, to love, and to show kindness. Now I will address the supposed question about my gender. I don't, nor have I ever been just, in a sense, a male. I don't feel trans either. How many times have I cried, not understanding why me? Why am I like this? Why am I not normal? I was made fun of and shamed. I stopped, in a sense, even as a child, doing PE in school, athletics, because I was, in a sense, abused for my intersex condition. Looking like I don't even have a dick when I'm not hard. I received it from, I received an F in PE in my youth because I didn't do anything wrong, but I didn't want to take my clothes off, in a sense, in the locker room. I also felt like my brain is more than one gender. It's more like two genders. And it is, since, enmeshed and facilitates between them vacillates, in a sense, from time to time. Like it's a team working together or sometimes working against each other. At other times it feels like I'm fighting or having one thinking and then another thinking that's completely opposed. To tell you, at times I can feel overwhelmed because of this, but I have learned to try to understand. And now I understand that and this makes it easier. I just love both parts of me. For them, for who I am. May I always May I always do the same or strive to do the same and see others with eyes of love too. I hope this helps you to understand. I am also willing to talk privately to some if they wish on this issue because I see its value. Me and my gender diversity, genderqueer, intersex, and male. My gender is, to me, intersex, genderqueer, male. I have always felt odd, but I didn't know that I was intersex. But my parents knew and kept it hidden from me, hoping that I would pass as just male, just normal. I am not totally normal, and have always, in a sense, treated me as if something was wrong. Something was just not right. I just never knew why. Others were treating me in this odd, in my family, in this odd, behavior. It's calling me over dramatic. I just needed to act normal. In other words, to act not true to me. I had a friend who thought that I was gay or something in my youth when it was not the case for me. I would say my feelings are definitely not homosexual. I would say it's heterosexual. But probably more accurate is gynosexual, is attraction to women, though my gender, involved is, has intersex, issues. I don't really apply, because of that, in a sense, to a true heterosexual, because it would have to be that someone that is different. I hold over and over again too many, in a sense, girly type of things or thinking, but I should not be assessed as gay. Gynosexual, for those who don't know what it is, a gynosexual is anyone who has sexual feelings toward a woman, derived from the Greek word gyno, meaning female or woman, and Latin for sexual, meaning relating to sex. The term gynosexual can be used when describing sexual orientations of an individual with a non-binary gender identity. Sexual orientation for the genderqueer person. I was not sure what was wrong with me. I was not gay. I didn't feel trans. But something else felt very different. And I gave up trying after a while to understand, and just tried hard, to just be me. But only male acting, was always a little bit different for me. Eventually, just accepting that I would never understand, and I just tried to be okay with me. I first actually found out that I was intersex after going to the doctor. He was checking my testosterone at around 23 years old and telling me I had less testosterone at that point than most women, and how did I not already know that I was intersex? I was outraged at first, as I was not really or ready, in a sense, to be told, certainly in that way, that I was not just a cis male. I felt shameful, as if somehow was broken and I wanted to hide. I later started looking into my gender in college, learning that there was different genders than just being male or female. The first time I read the description of the gender labeled genderqueer, I cried, because for the first time in my life, I felt someone else understood I felt that for once I was a little bit normal. I've had many differences in my, self-understanding, low testosterone, my female-sized nipple, my hidden penis, my severe hepatocytis, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, which means I had surgery from my parents to repair my penis without consent, never even explained to me in the correct way. I am definitely, at least mildly, form of intersex. And that the correction I had in my penis, for being abnormal, is in about 1 in about 250 males. So I don't even know why, people make it like I should be ashamed. And I actually can push my testicles and penis inside my body. It doesn't hurt, and it's no problem because I have a complete opening. But I'm proud of who I am, and I don't speak out about this stuff to shock people. I speak out of this to try to offer understanding, to try to offer people an ability to see and have compassion for others. And for ones out there, like me, who felt shame, felt alone, and didn't understand even their own body. This is often hard to try to be, in the sense, that similar voice, but it is so needed. Saying that things can be different about you, and that's okay, that's good, that the one should be proud of, to be intersex, to be genderqueer, and that others can understand. Often, I can still feel alone because of my gender. Like I don't always fit in. I'm like 90% or so, just an average, biologically male and 10% intersex, or maybe more. But mentally, I feel like a 60% male and 40% female sometimes. It's hard, as very few people, in a sense, admit to being intersex like me, which is also more reason why I have to do it. So often it feels like there are very few people who get me. And I feel like I don't know how to belong in a lot of places, as my gender is different compared to many or even most people. That many people want me, in a sense, to fit in and do what is expected of me. I am mildly intersex and genderqueer mentally, but it should be understood that I am not bi or gay by saying this, as well as I am an ally for others in the LGBTQI+ community. I remember when I told my mom I was changing my middle name. My name is Damien Marie AtHope, and the reason the female name of Marie was because I wanted to identify myself for how I feel in my dual gender. But when I changed my middle name, and I told my mom I was changing it to a female name, Marie, she was not at all happy. She's a Christian, fanatic, or a Christian, extremist in her thinking. And when I told her, that I feel male and somewhat female, so I wanted to have a full name to express this, she said, "How will people know that you're a man?" I said, "I don't care what others think. And if they don't see me as just a man, good." Because I am genderqueer, thus a little male and female. And she said, "But how are they going to know you're not gay? What if people think you're gay?" I said, "So, what's wrong with being gay? I know lots of gay people. I may not be gay, Mom, but as gay is not a bad thing. I don't feel bad if you think it should be, or if others think I shouldn't be. Also, people also, if people think I am gay from my middle name being female, she still expressed that she did not like what I had done. I actually was surprised she took it so bad, forgetting how bigoted religious people can be and think. If only XX equals female and only XY equals male, then how do you account for XO, XXY, XYY, XXYY, XXXY, XY/XO, XX/XO, and XX/XY individuals? Let me give you a little more background if you're interested in understanding more about me. My being mildly intersex, meaning I have biological and physical differences. Few of my obvious physical ones, as I've already stated. And to me, biologically, having my testosterone checked, being lower than some women, and mentally, emotionally, being attracted to more feminine things, such as, I have more joy watching a play than ever watching sports, and being creative more than, ever wanting to work on a car. And I enjoy cooking, shopping, I could be a clothes stylist, decorating, getting a manicure and pedicure, feel wonderful, and painting my nails, and I have tattooed my eyeliner on, and I feel more often comfortable around a group of women than I do around a group of men. And I often forget that I am, in a sense, perceived as male being around women. I've always felt, in a sense, offended when women are put down or devalued, since often it feels like this is against me, forgetting that I am perceived as male. Even in one of my counseling courses, in school for my bachelor's degree, the class was like 20 students, and I did not realize that I was, in a sense, the only male perceived until the professor asked me, "How does it feel to be the only male in the class?" I actually had to look around, since I did not even believe this. I was the only perceived male since I felt so comfortable. But one cannot prove to others how they feel, or should they even have to. I don't believe that everyone who is genderqueer has to prove their gender diversity or the reasons why. But I will say that with an honest heart, that I have felt both male and female for my whole life. To simply call myself just a man seems to deny something inside. I was ashamed of that I have, in a sense, what they call two spirits in Native American. But after realizing how relatively common this is, I am now okay and realize there's nothing strange or nothing to be ashamed of. I am not the only one. According to Ruthus Nevid Fletcher, 2008, everyone starts out biologically as a female, and it takes 3 processes to make a male. First are defeminizing androgens. Next are masculizing androgens, and then testosterone. Actually, genetic differences are quite common. 1 in every 1,500 males and 1 in every 5,000 females has a genetic gender difference, which is more than people with red hair in the world. That is 3 times more men than women, so I guess I'm in good company. I see myself as intersex, genderqueer male. Some may still say, "I don't even know what that means. Please explain." Okay, Well, intersex is a spectrum of sexual gender between male and female. And genderqueer, for me, is mental thinking, in a sense, internalizing gender or gender outside expression that is not of one gender, or is gender fluid between them, or more than one gender at any given time or point of another. I often hear, Damien, I don't like labels. Well, you seem to mean you don't like my choice of labels. And you not liking my labels is your preference. It does not remove the reality and the clarification and distinction it explains for me. And you're not liking something just like any personal choice only relates to your personal choice, not about me. In other words, it's like someone not liking a flavor of ice cream. That dislike does not remove the reality of the flavor being good to someone else. But to address or expose the real issue is that often it is when someone states, I don't like labels, after I just expressed or used a label. They are actually not being honest. They are trying to be controlling of me. See, they are not really stating some personal preference they hold, so we know they are and how they are seeing things. Instead, what they are really doing is they are trying to be subversive, as in they are trying to circumvent our rights, to self-define with a label they don't like, agree with, or understand. Thus, they are trying to police the labels that can be used when according to them they should. However, what is actually distasteful is when people attempt to limit me, confine me, or put me down with a label, especially an inaccurate or abusive label I don't fit or deserve. While I may have a high tolerance for those who may be uninformed or ignorant, I tend to likewise have a low tolerance for those who choose to be stupid or seem to champion unintelligence. One has fully become themselves authentically when they are no longer trying to fit the limitations of others, given or forced upon them. This resistance or rejection of what one is not should come less from some aggression towards them than from a true act of loving oneself. Female, male, intersex at a glance. So first let me address it from religion teaches the male and female are the only thing. Science knows that that is wrong, and there is more diversity in gender in reality. Biological sex is our anatomy, as in a sense female, male, or intersex. It includes our internal and external sex organs, chromosomes, and hormones. Some people are intersex rather than male and female. Our biology, sex, is how we, in a sense, define as female or woman, man, male, or intersex. It describes the internal and external bodies, including our sexual and reproductive anatomy, our genetic makeup, and our hormones. In a book, Between X and XY, Intersexuality and the Myth of Two Sexes, by 2009 by Gerald N. Callahan, PhD. And so an editor's review of the publication weekly said that it combines current scientific information and explains that why our, in a sense, consideration of two sexes is more a social than a biological construct. He argues that there's no simple, in a sense, footprint way to determine sex. For example, the chromosome structure of XX for females and XY for males is not fully predictive because of various genetic disorders that can play a longer or a larger role. Similarly, genitalia may be quite varied in representation and constitute a difference rather than two direct points. Blurred lines. Human sexual chromosome swapping occurs before and often previous more than in thought. It turns out that the rigid line in the sand over which the human sex chromosomes, the Y and the X, got to avoid crossing over is but blurred more than previous thought. Contrary to the current scientific consensus, Arizona State University assistant professor Melissa Wilson Sayres has led a research team that has shown that X and Y DNA swapping may occur much more often. And this, in a sense, swapping may in turn aid in understanding of human history and diversity, health, and disease, as well as blur rigid chromosome interactions of sexual identity. Some may wonder, is transgender possibly connected to intersex? Well, there is a biological basis for transgender identity. And while there may be some who are both intersex and transgender, it is not something that is always or should always be seen together. In fact, it is likely not even commonly together. To read more about this, you can check out what's the difference between being transgender or transsexuality and having an intersex condition. Intersex is part of my biological sex. I am intersex genderqueer, having a brain that feels like both sexes, but feel also mostly male in my expression. I posted that I was intersex on Facebook, and this is just some of the responses that I received. What is that? That's that Bruce Jenner shit. Thought that was transgender. Biologically intersex? What is that? I'll pass, thank you very much. No, that's not transgender. It's having a brain of both sexes. Challenger. To me, how many genders? Two, or two, writing two in different ways. And my response, there are more than just two genders. The challenger, nope. By the way, all those other responses were different people. The challenger, no, there's not. Transsexualism doesn't exist, although they identify as either male or female. My response, I am intersex, and yes, there is scientific proof for both. Challenger, there is very little in our genetic makeup that makes us different than a banana. Biologically, it's impossible to have more than female or male chromosomes. But that case study clearly identifies it as being female. Have you ever met anyone over 30 who's got their shit together and is not emotionally unstable, attention whore, who identifies as being gender fluid? Because I have not. My response, my gender is intersex genderqueer male. By the way, I am almost 50, and I can certainly say I'm over 30, and I can be identified as gender fluid, and I do have most of my shit together, especially emotionally. So how can you say that you haven't? Because now you've met me. That just makes me question your mental stability, as the challenger says. My response, why would you try and insulate that Just my being born with a different gender is something that has to do with mental health issues. Challenger, because it's delusional. You're just a male. I know that you really want to be something different, but you're not. My response, I gave you 4 scientific research articles, and you still don't get it. You are the one denying science, not me. Challenger, there's a lot of non-biological males and females out there. Gender fluid doesn't exist. Also, those links you gave me are hardly reliable sources. My response, you are stating an opinion without a scientific support. Challenger, you're posting a bunch of junk sciences. My response, what source do you want? Challenger, a reputable source. And so I said to him, I gave you 3 research studies. Challenger, give me a chance to read some of these articles and I'll get back to you with my opinion. Which he never did. My response, okay, I appreciate your willingness to look. Lastly, I know that I am intersex to some amount. And as I said before, I have testes that don't produce enough testosterone, or at least didn't before when I was 23 and had it tested. As usual, my testosterone was lower than most, as I stated, was told that my testosterone was lower than most women. And that was told to me from a urologist, not something I asked. And I was actually ashamed of at the time. A shortage of testosterone can lead to delay or incomplete puberty. Breast enlargement, which I have. I had a delayed puberty as well, as I have female-sized nipples. And some breast enlargement. And I do have infertility, even though I went and got myself cut to make sure I could never have kids, because I just choose it as a life stance. Some affected individuals, like me, also have genital differences, including an opening in the urethra underside of the penis, which I had, or usually small penis, although mine, it could be said that having a hidden penis, it goes from 0.0, showing nothing at all, towards about 5.5 when it's hard. So I'm in a sense unusual. I go from nothing to something. But I don't think that people have to explain. I just like to explain so I can try to help remove ignorance. Older children and adults, in a sense, have syndromes where they're in a sense can be taller than their peers, and yet still have gender issues. Affected individuals typically, in a sense, don't produce testosterone as usual. The testosterone is a hormone that, in a sense, directs male sexual development before birth and during puberty. A shortage of testosterone can lead to delayed or incomplete puberty. As I said before, breast enlargement, reduced facial body hair, which I couldn't grow a mustache or a beard really for the longest time, well into adulthood, and inability to have biologically children. So, Intersex, in a sense, info from the government. Intersex is a group of conditions, and there is, in a sense, a discrepancy between external genitalia and internal genitalia, the testes, in a sense, or ovaries. The older term for this condition was often hermaphroditism, although the older terms still included in some articles of reference. They have been replaced by most experts, parents, and families. Increasingly, this group of conditions is called disorders of sexual development. And when it comes to this, intersex can be divided, in a sense, for them into 4 categories, although I think there's definitely more, but they say it is 46XX intersex or 46XY intersex, true gonadal intersex, and complete or undetermined intersex. And so each one is discussed in more detail, and in many children, the case of intersex may remain undetermined even with modern diagnostic techniques. So to me, it really comes down to, choosing to respect the dignity of others and striving to understand. And to me, this also connects to me being a rationalist, trying to be of reason and respecting of science, but also respecting of humanity. And so to me, every atheist also, in a way, is an atheist leader. We should act accordingly with style. Not just in what not to believe, but how to properly believe. How to use reason, how to use evidence. And so I really appreciate you taking time, to listen to my, talk on this. And remember, LGBTQI-Phobia hurts us all. Everyone needs home, which is my acronym for honor, open, motivate, embrace.